Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. I hope that you are all well. Welcome back, and if you are new, thanks for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I have the honor to talk with a debut Canadian author that I have already mentioned a few times in some of my past videos. Tamar Glouberman, who is the author of Chasing Rivers, a White Water Life, and this is a memoir that Tamar wrote about her adventures being a whitewater rafting guide. It is incredible, especially as a debut, and if you watched my video a couple days ago where I awarded the best books of 2022 that I had read, then you know this was crowned best memoir. Tamar writes in a way that really draws you in and you are part of all of the adventures, both in the water and in Tamar's life. You do not have to be a whitewater enthusiast to enjoy this book. This is one of the books that I recommended for the Reading Across Canada challenge. So if you want to learn, more about Tamar and this book, then I hope you enjoy our chat. Hello everyone, welcome to our special guest today. We have Tamar Glouberman with us. And Tamar is the author of this fantastic memoir. This is Chasing Rivers, a White Water Life. This just came out. When did this come out, Tamar?
October 15th.
October 15th, so a few months out now. And it is all about your adventures being a guide as a whitewater rafting guide, I guess. And I am near the Bow River, which does not have whitewater rafting.
That being said, I have rowed down the Bow River in a raft.
Yes, in the summer, when I sit out on my balcony, I watch all the rafts go down the river, and it's a beautiful and very relaxing way of just spending an afternoon. So I just actually finished this yesterday, and really enjoyed reading about your adventures. And I thought I would just ask you a few questions and we'll talk about the memoir, if that's okay with you.
Sounds great. Thanks. Yeah. I watched your video the other day where you have your challenge for 2023. Yes. I was supposed to say 2003, like I just missed 20 years of my life. It's a problem with writing a memoir. You're living in the past all the time. But yeah, I watched that video, and it's such a cool challenge. And I also want to say thank you for including me as one of the possible authors for the January challenge.
Yeah, and it's actually your book. As I was reading it, it actually would fit a lot of the other prompts as well. Just because it's set in a lot of different places. So you have settings in the Yukon, in the Northwest Territories, in Quebec, and in BC. So like there's a lot of places that people could use it if they're not doing the prompts. It definitely fits for the prompt for BC, which is a book about nature. So there's a lot of stuff about nature for sure. How long have you been rafting, and how long have you been a guide?
Let me think about that. So I started raft guiding. The very first time I raft guided was in 1999. I started working at a rafting company in 1998, which is when I learned to kayak, and I was working in the office. But I did some other guiding before that. I'm trying to think of my very first summer of guiding. I guided, for those of you, anybody knows Whistler, on the mighty river of Golden Dreams, which is sort of like this stream that people take floaty toys down. But you could also, have a guide and lead you down in a kayak or canoe. And that was my very first guiding job. It was in the summer of 1994. And so a long time ago. And when I started raft guiding, my one of the guys that I worked for used to always, like, whenever I do anything to piss him off, he's like, "Don't do that, or I'll send you back to the River of Golden Dreams." Which isn't such a bad place. It's actually a fun river. There's lots of cool wildlife. Like if you go down in the evening, there's tons of beavers.
That is very Canadian.
But yeah, so I've been guiding, it's funny, I do mostly wildlife guiding now, but like a lot of people, I obviously work with a lot of people that are quite a bit younger than me, and it's funny, like a lot of them, weren't even born when I started guiding. They all find that really funny. Yeah, whatever. I've been guiding for a long time. Yeah. 1994 was my first season of guiding.
Okay. Well, and you obviously know what you're doing, and you obviously have enjoyed doing what you're doing. But in your memoir, you talk about kind of the expectations that people have, and I would say the double standards that exist between men and women, because there, at the time anyway, I don't know if this has changed at all, but there really weren't too many women as guides. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's definitely a topic that a few people have asked me about since this book came out. And it's, when I started guiding, and I like, the first river that I really worked on was the Hudson, and and a little bit different than it is around New York City. I think people, when I say that, people picture it around New York City, but up in the northern part of New York, it's clean. I used to drink right out of it to prove it, and it's got rapids, and it's beautiful, and you can do like a whole 17-mile stretch without seeing a house, kind of thing. It's quite lovely. And I started guiding there, and there was a lot of guides there. There was 11 companies, I believe, when I started working there, and there's a handful of women that worked full time. And I can even there was Lori and Donna, who both appear in my book very briefly, considering how big of a part they were in my life, but that's the nature of writing a memoir. And Julie, who doesn't appear in my book, but she was a big part too, and all three of them actually still guide there, which is kind of awesome. And then there was Jen, who I don't think she's in my book either, but she was guiding there. Now she's still guiding too. She's guiding in Colorado. And it's funny because they're all actually a little bit older than me, not a lot, but a little bit. They're all still raft guiding. But yeah, it's funny, like I can still tell you, like it was such a close community of women, and we all I didn't work at the same company as any of them, but I knew them really. They were such an inspiration to me, because there was like 100 guys working on the river and 5 women. But that being said, and there was definitely I talk about this in the book, there was definitely some guests that would come and be like, oh, why do we have the chick? Some people didn't care. Certainly not everybody was like that. But there was certainly, I certainly got a little bit of that. But what's amazing is on the Hudson, I don't remember there ever being other male raft guides that ever gave me a hard time about being, a woman on the river. People, the paddling community there was amazing. They were accepting, and when I was learning to kayak, all these guys who were way better kayakers than me would totally hang out with me and take me places, and be totally good to me and stuff. And it was an amazing community part of it was really so welcoming. And I spent one season on the Ottawa, and there was tons of women working there. Now that I was thinking back on it, and I'm just I guess some of the comments people made were a little bit sexist. One of the companies had all these giant rafts, and they hired all these really pretty women to guide them, and didn't really teach them anything about guiding, but those rafts were so big they could just run through anything. And they used to call it stewardess tours, which I guess is kind of a little bit sexist. but aside from that little bit, I think for the most part on the Ottawa as well, there was so many women working there, and people it was pretty welcoming to women there as well. I went out to BC, and my boss wanted to hire me. Basically, he wanted to hire more women, so he was certainly very, very welcoming to women as well. But I do have to say that some of the guides that I met there, some of them were awesome, and then some of them, yeah, they're just especially if after I'd been working for a while, and they'd come into the company, I had some seniority over them, and I can tell you there's a few guys that did not love that. But whatever. And I remember one time walking into I was going to be spending some more time in Whistler, or actually I was kind of south of there in Brackendale, but I was going to spend more time in that area, and I kind of I knew I was going to be there on and off throughout the summer, so I thought, oh well, maybe I'll go to the day rafting company and see if they need a hand now and then. And I knew that they did, actually. I'd heard from people that they needed some extra guides, and I walked in there with my resume in hand and some pretty good rivers on there that I'd say are a fair bit harder than what they were guiding in. The guy wouldn't even talk to me. He took one look at me and was like, no, we're not hiring. And I started talking. He's like, no, he didn't want to listen to it. It was just he sized me up and down and was just like, no. I'm like, okay. And, there was points in my life where I probably would have tried a little harder to prove him wrong. And then there's just like, you know what? I don't really need to work for you if you're going to be like that, because I can find work. And I did. I was very busy all that summer rafting way harder rivers. So just like, whatever. There's definitely times and definitely guests that were sort of like, I don't know, why do we have her? But, with guests, I don't remember a single time, but where by the end of the trip, people still felt that way. So for the most part, most of the guys I've worked with have been awesome. Like most people were very welcoming. As I said, the paddling community tends to be a really welcoming community. So, and things have changed. Like, I think back in the day, it depends where you are. Like, I think on like, the Colorado River going through the Grand Canyon, I feel like there's always been a lot of women guides there. I don't know why that is, but I feel like there's always been a lot of women working on there. And so there's some places where there's always been, and then some places where it's it's been a bunch of big dudes. And when they see a, 5'2" woman showing up, they're just like, I don't know if you can do this. And, I certainly questioned whether I could do it. But in the end, I think I questioned it more than most of the guys that I worked with. They were just like, they got into a raft and started rowing, and they're like, oh, okay, she knows what she's doing. And that was that. But yeah, and now I think, since I started guiding, there's way more women, which is so nice to see, because it's definitely, it's not like you definitely need a bit of strength to do it, but it's also, it's so much more about reading the water, because even like the biggest, toughest guys that I ever guided with, they're not stronger than the river, It's all about having, and the best guides that you ever see, like, barely do anything. They just sort of like do a little tweak, and then they could like be drinking a cup of coffee through this giant rapid, because they just know how to read it.
I'm glad to hear that, like, you talk about this in the memoir, that the community is welcoming and that the community is important to you, and all of those kinds of things. And I'm glad to hear that more women are kind of finding their place in that. So it's good to hear that it sounds like you maybe paved the way for some of that to happen. So that's a good thing. Also in the memoir, which is one of the reasons that it's a strong, I think, book for the BC challenge that I have for the reading across Canada, is there's definitely a strong connection to nature. And you talk about what nature has taught you, and how, and I don't know if you even realize that you're doing that in the thing. Like, I was like, I wonder if she realizes this. And it was a really neat way of like, this is happening in nature, and how you kind of saw your life and learned some life lessons through nature. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? I'm trying really hard not to do spoilers as well. So I'm going to talk about some of the bigger things, but there are some really important things that I think that you make connections to with nature. So if you can talk about that, that would be great.
Well, I'm going to first start with, I kind of, as I was writing it, it wasn't my intention, but certainly by the end of the book, I realized that I was doing that a fair bit. And there was a line I thought of, like, when I was standing in my very last, like, the very last proofs kind of thing, when you're not supposed to change anything anymore. I'm like, oh, where can I put this line? And I didn't end up putting it in, but I was like realizing, like, as I was doing it, that somewhere at the end I should have, but I was just like, how do I write this without being super cheesy? But this is how I felt, that I was just like, I spent so many years saying I was a raft guide, and like, saying that I was guiding rivers and stuff, and really it was the river that was guiding me. So, I wanted to write that in somewhere, but in the end, because it was really the river that was the guide, because it taught me so much. Like, being in nature teaches you so much about, well, being in nature just makes you feel good, but it also teaches you so much about everything. Like, it teaches you your place. It teaches you that, you're not that big and you're not that important, but if you pay attention, you can get by. And if you pay attention, it's very welcoming to you. It's, not mean and nasty. It's very, nature can be very forgiving, and like, the river can be very forgiving as long as you give it due respect. But also, I talk about this in the book, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but, like the river, how it always just moves forward, like no matter what, it's going forward. And even like, you can build a huge dam, and if you don't maintain it, eventually the river is going to rip through that too. The river's strong and it keeps going. You never know what's around the next corner. And sometimes you just got to trust that life's like that too, that like, as much as you'd like to as much as you're being, like as much as you're being recirculated in some eddy, eventually you're going to get shot out and like move on. And yeah, sometimes you just got to trust that. And it's how nature, our lives are, just like the life of anything in nature, and everything moves on. And yeah, sometimes you really got to remember that.
It's interesting that you talked about that one line that you didn't include, because I mean, that really is what it is about, like you do make that clear without saying it so explicitly. There is a line on page 117 that when I read it, I went, oh, this is like this, at least at this point, when I got to this point, I was like, this is what this book is about. So I don't know if you agree, but I'll read to the line and then you can see. And it says, it's on the very bottom last sentence of page 117. I'd felt honored to experience true wilderness and to see how little my own mistakes mattered. And I went, wow. And I stopped and I closed the book and I held it for a minute.
It's a good line.
Good line. Yeah, you wrote that.
I have to admit, I hadn't put all that much weight in it when I wrote it, but now that you bring it out of everything, I'm just like, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, there is something. And I kept going back to it, even as I kept reading, and I would go back to it and I'd be like, oh, this is like an important line. It's not just a throwaway line. So yeah, there's a few in there. Yeah.
Yeah, good choice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there are lots of themes, as we talked about a few of them already, but one of the themes in your memoir that I think is important is mental health. And you talk about, it seems to play almost a dual role. Like there's some positive things that nature has given you. There's some negative things and kind of how that plays with your mental health. So can we talk about your approach to mental health now? And and maybe how rafting is still part of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still stuck on that line. I'm like, I think you're right. I think that is what the book is about.
I think that's it. Page 117.
There we are. Thanks. People keep asking me what it's about. I'm like, I don't know. It's a memoir about my rafting years, but I think that line actually describes it a lot better.
It's also about your rafting years.
So mental health. As anybody who's dealt with mental health issues, we know it's certainly an ongoing thing. But rafting. Yeah, I mean, right from the start, rafting, it was this amazing thing. I suddenly had like this whole community that I was part of, and it felt so good. And like, there was so much room to learn and grow, and I felt better. I don't know, I just felt stronger and better about myself. Like, I remember just like, I used to be like, it's hard to even picture this, but I'm like, I know I used to be like a little bit like intimidated about talking in front of people and stuff. And then like, if you stand in front of a bus every single day, like shouting and like, doing this safety talk where you're throwing all these bad jokes, and sometimes people laugh hysterically and sometimes people just stare at you. Like you totally bomb. And I laugh because somebody has to. And you kind of, and like, like on the river all day, you're like making conversation, and I'm like, tell a lot of jokes. Well, it depends. On day trips, I used to tell a lot of jokes. My multi-day trips, I gave people a break and actually let them enjoy the nature without me talking the whole time. But it gave me so much more self-confidence because of that. And like, and just being able to learn from the river every day, and like understanding, like having that connection where not only do you know how to read the river and get better, you get better at reading the river and feel confident in that, but you also like just start to get to know it. Like I remember, living in this big staff house right beside the river, and I'd wake up in the morning and I wouldn't open my eyes. I'd just keep my eyes closed for a few minutes, and well, probably not a few minutes, but a few seconds, and just listen to the river and decide if it's come up or down and how much, before like actually checking the gauge. And back in the day, we actually had to call this number, and like the gauge would bing a certain amount. The phone would bing a certain amount of time and tell you what level you were at in the gauge and stuff. That then eventually we had internet. We could just look it up. But yeah, I know, I'm just like, how close to I am being right? And I know other people did that too. And like, it, like, you know, we're pretty good at it. Like, even with your eyes closed, you could tell, like, and you get this connection, and it just feels so good to be part of something like that. Like, you know, that just gives you joy in itself. And then, like, of course, like, you know, the rush of whitewater and the excitement of going down big rapids, it's just like, man, like, you know, you get all like nervous and beforehand, and then you're so focused in the moment. And it just, like, you know, for somebody like me, who I think is like a lot of people, I've always had a hard time focusing on one thing at a time. Like, you know, it's my brain's all over the place, which I think is a pretty common thing. But when you're challenging yourself and you're in, like, you know, a big rapid, then it's just like, you're there, you know, you're not everywhere else, you're just there. And it's just like, it's this amazing feeling, and all these things just bring you so much joy. And it's like, it's not like you're not going through shitty times too, you know, like, you know, all the regular crap that people go through. But for, you know, for those moments when you're out on the river, it's like everything's better. And you know, you carry that with you, and it's just like this amazing thing. And, you know, obviously in my book, not everything goes well, and, you know, and there's some hard times, and I definitely went through some pretty dark times in my life, and I'm still, like, you know, sometimes I'm still amazed that I'm still here. But and you know, a lot of that, like, when I left the river, I definitely, like, it was there wasn't that escape. And, you know, it's like, yeah, I'd still go out for hikes, and I do all the things that people tell you to do. You know, you exercise and you eat well, and well, and, you know, get out in nature, and, you know, socialize and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, yeah, I still, you know, try to see therapists and all that. And for a long time, I still felt awful. and eventually, you know, things started to get better. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of things, and, you know, all those things that I just mentioned, like, make you feel better. But definitely, like, one of those things is, like, really spending more time in nature. And, like, you know, I started working as a wildlife guide, and spending a lot of time around bears, and just getting to understand them. And it's just like, man, it's like, it's amazing how being in nature of any sort just makes you feel so much better. And these days, I spend a lot of time rowing this river that's, you know, it's not challenging in that same way, but it's challenging in different ways. Like, sometimes there's a bear standing in the middle of the river, and I have to figure out how, like, I don't know, but we're looking for bears. And just, like, I don't know, this past summer, I spent a lot of time rowing, and it's amazing. Like, every day that I rode, it felt fantastic. It's just like, it's this amazing, like, you just, like, you know, seeing the water levels fluctuate, and seeing, like, you know, seeing, like, the like, you know, plants on the side of the rivers changing with the season, you know, like certain flowers coming out and dying, and the trees, like, you know, their leaves changing, and the bears, you know, getting fatter. and, and like, you know, the salmon starting to come in, and then the salmon die, you know, spawning and dying. And, like, you know, like, you see, like, the progression of the world. And it's just like, you know, as that line said, like, it makes you realize how small your own mistakes are and problems are and all that. And it just, you know, makes you feel like you're part of this big thing. And it's, yeah, so I mean, that's still, like, there's definitely other pieces to staying sane. But yeah, I'd say that getting out there is still a big part of it for me.
Yeah, nature is really important to me for definitely my mental health as well. And I always feel a connection to nature. So I loved when you talked about that in the book. I also think it's probably pretty significant that you're doing wildlife tours now, and that bears are significant, as that's significant for one of the important characters in the book. So yeah, so that's really neat. I love that there's still that connection. So the book is about all of the, you know, successes and the excitement of the rafting and guiding. But then you took a creative writing program at UBC. So can you talk about how you maybe went from rafting to writing, and where that decision was made and where that came from?
Well, I think, like a lot of writers, I've been writing my whole life. Even if I haven't been publishing, I've been like writing stories my whole life, and I've written a bunch of things, just that nothing that anybody has ever seen before. I wrote I actually, while I was guiding, I wrote this YA novel that guess I say it was a YA manuscript, because I guess it only becomes a novel when it's published, which it is not. But that took place in the Grand Canyon with this girl that, she's on one of those Hoods in the Woods programs kind of thing, and gets separated, and her whole story in the Grand Canyon, which is a place that's kind of close to my heart. So I wrote that whole story, and I'm going to step back before that and admit I did some other writing courses before that. I did one semester writing course at the Vancouver Film School, a screenwriting course, and that was like, I'm trying to think, I guess it was like 1999 that I did that, because it was the year that 1999. Yeah, it was the year that like two of my grandparents died that year, and I kind of like delved into writing a screenplay, just sort of something else to think about other than death. And then I decided that I was going to become a screenwriter, and which is kind of funny because I don't really watch that many movies. But I went to film school as well. This is my undergrad degree, was in film, and so I was always trying to tell stories and whatever. I just think that wasn't, and I'm not even saying I wouldn't get back into that, but boy, screenwriting is a hard medium to break into. Writing a book is a hard medium to get into too, but like screenwriting even more so. But yeah, and I wrote a couple of screenplays. Then I decided that screenwriting wasn't gonna get me anywhere, and I wrote a book, and I sent it to a couple publishers and got turned down, but I have to admit, I didn't probably try as hard as I could have, because part of me is just like, yeah, they're turning it down because it's not that great. And I really want to be a better writer, and, just writing for myself and criticizing myself and then getting people I know to read it and, getting their feedback wasn't really advancing my writing. So I figured I'd apply to UBC, and to be quite frank, I really didn't think I was going to get in, but I did. And I remember actually saying to one of my professors, because I did it like the online one, but the very first course that I took was actually like at like the summer school, whatever, you could go and do it in person and stuff. And I went and did that. And my professor there, like, he had a little, I don't know, we each got some time with him alone. I remember sitting in the UBC Rose Garden on this beautiful summer day, discussing like, the story I was working on, and talking about the story I'd written to get in, which he had read. And I was saying, yeah, I know it wasn't very good. I was just like, but I guess it was better than some people, because I felt like everybody else in the class was so much more advanced than I was, and they knew so much. And I'm just like, I said, I kind of feel like what happened was, you accepted all the people that were really good, and then you had a few more slots, and I got one of those. He's like, that's not how it works. But I was just like, I didn't really believe him when he said that, because I was just like, this is really how I felt. It was like, oh, well, we just need to fill a few more slots to, whatever. We'll give her a try, because everybody in that class just seemed like so amazing. But yeah,
I'm impressed by your writing. Actually, you do very well at the whole showing, not telling. I don't like it. Yeah, you do very well. And I thought, wow, for like a debut, memoir, but debut book coming out, like, this is really good writing. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, it was.
So really I went because I wanted to become a better writer, but it's not that it, and it wasn't like, oh, okay, this is going to be my career or whatever. It was kind of a funny thing. I for years sort of dabbled in the idea of going back to school, just because I like continuous learning. Like, I really enjoy, it's funny, I hated school when I was in high school and stuff, but I I love the idea of continuous learning and stuff, and not being forced to learn subjects that you don't really care about and stuff, and just sitting there in class. But so I was like, oh, I want to go back to school, but I should do something where I'll actually make some money. So then at one point in my life, I was just like, but everything I want to do doesn't really make any money. And I was just like, but I'm single. I don't have kids that are relying on me. I'm like, I can, I've saved up some money. I can afford to send myself to school part-time. And so I just went and did it. And, I think, that's, you have to be realistic if you're, that chances are you're not going to make any money writing, but boy, it feels really good to do.
Well, that's good to hear, because that was one of my questions for you, is to kind of share what that writing experience is like, especially since you wrote a memoir and you're having to think back on those past experiences and relive some of those things. And, like, what was that like? Because you had written the YA book, which, yeah, you're using your experiences and your knowledge, but this was definitely more personal, and the memoir is more vulnerable, so you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah, the YA book, I mean, it relied on a bit of my knowledge of like the canyon and whatever, but it was definitely fiction. it was real fiction. It wasn't like, some people write fiction that's very close to their lives. It's just like, yeah, this had to do with stuff that I knew, but it was definitely a very made up story. Yeah, writing a memoir. Yeah, it definitely was super hard at times, reliving all this stuff. And then again, some of it is really awesome to be able to relive. And the fact is, I relive my life all the time, whether or not I'm writing it. I just like, I feel like my past doesn't get as far back in the rearview mirror as it does for most people. Or I don't know what other people, I have no idea. I shouldn't say that. I have no idea how other people think, but I feel like from talking to people that I get the feeling that other people's pasts get further back in the rearview mirror. Mine sort of is still right there often. Like the objects in mirror closer than they appear. So everything's just sort of right there. But I considered writing it not a memoir. And when I was in, this answer is going to be very scattered, I apologize. When I was at UBC, we had to take courses in a bunch of different areas of writing. So, like I took like writing for children and fiction and translation and nonfiction, obviously, and whatever, so you take a bunch of different courses. And I found that no matter what I was writing, the story that I eventually wrote as Chasing Rivers, pieces of that would come into things. I shouldn't say they weren't in absolutely every story, but there was things that would poke out in an awful lot of stories. And I kind of eventually realized that if I didn't write this story, that I was never going to be able to move on and write other things. Like, it was just too much there. I was just like, this is obviously, I don't know if it's a story that anybody else wants to read, but it's the story that I need to write in order to grow as a writer and a person and all that. So, and, I definitely considered doing it a bit of like that, close fiction, like where you write, basically about yourself. And like, and that's a lot safer in a way, because one of the things about writing this, I'm okay with exposing myself, which is weird because I didn't really think I would be. Like, there's a lot of things in that story that until I wrote them down, nobody else ever knew about me. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I just didn't talk about ever. And so it's kind of weird that I sort of feel okay with the fact that even like, my parents' best friends are reading this about me. I'm like, it's okay. But what I do worry about a lot is what other people who are represented in the book are going to think. It's like some of them's names are changed. Some of them said I could use their names. But like, I worry, like, most of the people that I wrote about in the book are people I love. And I want them to, I hope that came out in the book, and I hope that they read it that way. But it's really hard, like, writing about other people. But at one point, I'm just like, I just like the whole sort of fiction, I was just like, I don't even know where the lines blur and where it becomes that. Like, I guess I took the easy way out. It seemed easier to just write it as a memoir than trying to, fit it into this sort of fiction, but based on reality. I was just like, I'm just going to write like as close to reality as I can manage, like obviously every memoir, like, we all remember things differently, but I'm going to be as true to how I remember things and as true to like, stuff that I can rummage up in my emails, like is, as true as that experience can be. Yeah, I'm not sure if I made the right choice or not. That still has yet to be determined. But yeah, that's the choice I made.
No, I think it's a brave choice. I thought it was a very brave choice, and it's kind of, I'm just getting to know you by, reading the book and by talking to you today. But I think probably it sounds to me just from reading your book that you kind of approached it in the way that you approach, rafting and guiding, and just like, hey, this might be tough and this is where we're going to go, but I see the path and I'm going to take it and, do what I can and just keep going forward. Right. And so, I see it like that. And I think you could have just told this in a fictional story and it still would have been a great book. Right. But this one, maybe pulls at the heartstrings a little bit more and will find a place in people's hearts in a different way, I think.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, I spent 2 or 3 days with you reading it. So I enjoyed the adventure, like it was very well done. Speaking of adventures, what's next for you? What are some adventures that you have going on, either writing adventures or guiding or just other life things? What's happening for you?
Well, in terms of writing, I'm doing some research now. I actually want to write some historical fiction. Okay. Nice big change. Granted, right now I have the first 3 lines, so life could change, and I might be writing some other nonfiction. But that's my plan right now. So that's my. In terms of life adventures, I took 2 years away from the grizzly bears during COVID and was working in Tofino as a kayak guide, which was super fun. But I went back this past summer to working around grizzly bears, and it was so nice to be back with them that I'd say there's a good chance that I'm going to be doing that again. I'd love to tell you I was doing something new and different, but honestly, I kind of love that. And I work at 2 different places, and one of them we also have like tons of marine life too, because we're out on the water a lot, and there's like orcas and humpbacks and dolphins and seals and all sorts of cool stuff like that. So I don't know, it's I really enjoy working around wildlife. So I think for the next little while, I still feel like I have a lot to learn and a lot more adventures to have in that realm. Yeah.
That's excellent. Both of those sound really, really good to me. I like adventure, so that's a good thing. Maybe I'll come on you can guide me one day.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I look forward to reading. Yeah, I would really like that. And I look forward to reading whatever you decide to put out there. Historical fiction sounds great.
Thanks.
And that sounds really good. And thank you again for your time today and being with us and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you, Jolene. This is my very first YouTube experience. It's pretty awesome. Thanks.
Thanks again to Tamar for chatting with me. It was great to have an opportunity to get to know her a bit more, especially after reading her memoir. And she's an author and an adventurer that I will definitely be keeping my eye on for what she does next. If you like memoirs, then I highly, highly recommend checking this out. Please let me know in the comments below if you have read Chasing Rivers, or if there was anything from our chat that really resonated with you, made you think, that you enjoyed. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.